Say. My name is my name is Gun. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Civic Champs. If you haven't been on one of our webinars before, these are some logos that I'm affiliated with. I think the interesting ones, right? So this is my third tech startup, and you can see the logos that look a little different from those the other ones, more colorful. These are my two prior companies. One was called Rent Jungle, and one's called Community Health. But I've really enjoyed the last 5 years. I've been in the nonprofit space with you all. It's been my favorite industry by far. So, and Carly, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my name's Carly Euler. I'm the marketing director at Memory Fox. Before I came to Memory Fox, I worked at a bunch of different nonprofits and volunteered for a bunch of nonprofits. And these are some of the awesome logos of the awesome missions that I've been a part of over the years. So CODA Support Foundation, the Wiley Network, the Breast Cancer Coalition, and the BOMA Project. So all different types of missions, but I did focus on fundraising, special events, marketing, and communications. And I'm really excited to share ethical storytelling today because I feel like I've been thinking about it for a really long time, 10 years probably.
Yeah, no, we're super excited to have you, and what a great initiative that you guys did just to share knowledge with the sector here. So, a couple of quick logistics as well, and so we are going to be sending slides and a recording afterwards. So no need to take super copious amounts of notes. We also have this formal presentation by Carly's. We're going to be followed by a little bit of Q&A. And then we encourage everyone throughout to leave questions in chat. We'll try to get to those as we as we go, and then I'll potentially highlight some of those to Carly as well as she's presenting. And of course, stay till the very end. We have some freebies for you all as usual. But with that, I'll let Carly take it over.
Wonderful. Let me just share my screen here.
Ooh, Bridge to Terabithia. I like that one too. That was a very sad one, but very good.
Okay, what do we think? Can we see my presentation here?
Yep, looks good.
Wonderful. Looks
yep,
great.
Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and hop right in. So I know I already introduced myself a little bit, but thank you so much for coming. We're going to chat about ethical storytelling today. We're going to chat mostly about the ethical storytelling report and the insights that we got from it. But before I talk about the report, I do first want to let you know, how did we even get here? Basically, as kind of our backstory here before we created the report, in 2023, our team sort of identified this prominent pattern. It didn't really matter what speaking engagement it was. It didn't matter if it was virtual or in person or really what the topic was, but we always got a version of this very specific question. What do I do if the people I serve have sensitive stories they might not want to share? And the thing was, we were asked this question so many times and we really didn't have a good answer. Definitely not one that we felt super certain about. So we knew we had a lot to learn. We could have chosen just to continue to point people in other directions, and we could have just kept saying, hey, go check out these other resources. And we thought, you know what? We also need to learn about this. So we decided to go ahead and bring in some experts. We figured, well, the best way to learn about it is directly from the experts. So we put together in December of 2023 a panel where we invited 4 really exceptional storytelling experts to come join us to answer all of your questions. And we thought, we'll put together this panel and then we'll know everything, right? It'll be that simple. However, when we put together the panel, it was very important to us to have it be Ask Me Anything style. So when you registered, we had people ask questions. And we thought, it'll just be very simple, right? 4 panelists, 60 minutes. But then we had over 400 people register for this event, and we received 150 questions. So as you can probably imagine, we quickly determined we needed to find a way to continue the conversation. And even though that panel was amazing, we went through so many questions. You can obviously understand that just in 1 hour, there was no way we were going to get anywhere close to getting everyone's questions answered. So we created the ethical storytelling report. If anybody here would like to go ahead and give it a download, or we have it in our goodie bag that we'll give to you at the end of the session today, you can go ahead and do that. But basically, it is this really rich report that has advice, strategies, and insights all about ethical storytelling, trauma-informed language, stereotype stories, consent, privacy. There's really just so much to unpack here. So today I'm going to share with you kind of the high-level overviews of a lot of the topics that are in the ethical storytelling report. But the really interesting thing that we started the report with was, before we wanted to get to those actionable insights and those strategies, we thought the first thing we wanted to actually understand was everyone in the nonprofit sector, their current relationship with ethical storytelling. So I'm going to share a couple of our survey results with you. So first, we asked respondents to go ahead and rate how important ethical storytelling is to them as an individual on a scale of 1 to 5. We were really proud to report that every single person surveyed rated ethical storytelling as a 3 or greater. And people, you can easily by this chart, about 90% of our community actually views ethical storytelling as extremely important. So that's really great news. But next, we also sought to understand how one's individual values might differ from what they perceive the values of their organization to be, right? So probably at your nonprofit, you have certain things that you feel very strongly about, but maybe you're not sure if everyone on your team feels that way or your organization as a whole. So we asked the specific question. And notably, you can see that the charts scale in the same direction, but it is interesting to see that 73% reported that they believe that their organization finds it extremely important, while 20% believe that their organization just finds it very important, but still really promising stuff here on this chart. Okay, so one thing we know for sure here at Memory Fox is that ethical storytelling begins with the story collection process. So we asked our survey respondents on a scale of 1 to 5, how equipped do you feel to collect and share stories ethically and in a trauma-informed way? We really wanted to understand if nonprofits currently felt equipped to do these things, right? So we found that just a mere 9% of respondents feel that their story collection is extremely ethical currently, and 46.7%, which is the most common answer, they actually felt their process was just a little equipped to do it. So as it turns out, yeah, these answers really widely varied. And another thing that we know for certain here at Memory Fox is that the most important part of story collection is consent. And the cool thing is we found that nonprofits believe that too. So according to this chart, we found that about 90% of our respondents said that that they feel consent's extremely important when it comes to collecting community stories. And very few people listed it, below that extremely important, right? But like I mentioned, just because you believe that consent is extremely important, it doesn't necessarily mean that that you're collecting it regularly. So we asked our survey respondents to share if they felt their organization had a solid system in place. And we actually found that many organizations do not feel they have a solid system in place when it comes to collecting consent. So you can see these charts next to each other, they're very, very different. So, on that first chart, even though we saw that 90% believe it's extremely important, just about 20% feel they actually have a good system to collect consent. Similarly, respondents were most likely to answer that they just agree. About 30% said that, and 5%, this is our first chart where we're seeing somebody actually ranked a 1 on the scale. 5% actually said they actually strongly disagree that their organization has a good solid system in place currently. So there are a few other great insights from the survey portion of the report, but I want to wrap up this portion of the presentation with just sharing the top 5 feelings that we found in 2023. So the last thing I asked in our survey was a whole list of feelings, and I just asked people to simply check all that apply. We found the number one thing that people said that they feel or they felt about ethical storytelling is that 58% said that they actually struggle with wanting to collect stories from their community while doing no harm. So I imagine there's a lot of you here today, maybe that feel that way. That's probably why you're here, to learn some strategies, right? Thank you for coming, of course, and being willing to learn. But I want you to know that if you are feeling like you're in this 58%, you know, there's a lot of people that are feeling that way, and you are definitely in the right place. But the other top 5 feelings of 2023, it's really exciting to see that they all have a positive connotation. So 56% of our respondents said that they don't feel pressured to collect sad, traumatic stories just to raise more funds. That's really promising. Also, 55%, they said that I've set aside time to educate myself about trauma-informed ethical storytelling. So for this statistic, for example, if you all take this survey next year, you will be able to check that you did that. That is something that you prioritized as well. Similarly, 46% said that they feel the culture of storytelling at their organization is currently trauma-informed. And 41% said, I know the way we collect stories from our community is ethical. So these are really great, interesting survey results. There's a lot more in the report for you to check out. And I would say that I'm very optimistic that in 2024, we'll see all of these statistics, these positive ones, hopefully increase. All right, now let's get to the question portion with the insights and the advice. Just so you know, the report is broken down into 8 topics, and every single question that's answered in the report was actually brought to us by a nonprofit professional. So these are fully sourced from you. And before we hop into the insights, I do want to give a shout out to all of the people who answered the report. You might notice a very familiar name on this list. Gun was a contributor to our report. Thank you for contributing. But we also have a lot of really strong names on here of people who are doing this work all the time. So we have Maria Bryan, she's certified in trauma-informed storytelling. We have Frank Velasquez Jr., who he specializes in asset-based language. We have Sabrina Walker Hernandez. You probably recognize some of these names from other webinars and other events, but we were so thrilled that these people would contribute to us. And additionally, we did also invite nonprofit professionals like you to submit, as well as my team at Memory Fox, because we all have unique perspectives on these topics. So that's my little shout out to all of you. Okay, let's dig in. And before I dig in too far, I want to let you know, I know that this presentation is very dense. So I do recognize that I will be speaking pretty fast. But if you want to take screenshots, I know they're going to send out the slides afterwards. Please feel free to do that. But there's a lot of information coming at you right now, okay? So let's kick it off truly with just an overview of the recurring themes that I saw come up again and again. So we found there's kind of 4 key recurring themes. So number 1, a lot of times it was mentioned that it's important to craft an ethical storytelling standards guide. Later in the presentation, I actually will explore 8 features that I recommend be in your guide. So I'll get to that in a little bit. Number 2, please be upfront with all the options that you can offer to your storyteller. So what options for anonymity do you offer? What platforms are you planning to share their story on? Do they have a time frame for how long you're planning to share their story or use their story? When you lay out all of these options and these offerings ahead of time and really make your intentions known, that's how you're going to become a trustworthy story steward. Number 3, you always want to give the storyteller the final yes or no when it comes to publishing their story. I know a lot of times we might feel like we're up against a deadline. Maybe you have a story you're trying to get out before a gala or for your end of year appeal. But I do just want to emphasize that there really is no deadline that's more important than being a good steward of a sensitive story. And number 4, I'm going to say it now. I'm going to say it probably 7 more times throughout this presentation, but consent, consent, consent. This came up in nearly every answer that was submitted in the report. And we're going to talk about consent as a whole a little bit further down, but yes, this is so, so important. Okay, so that was kind of the really high level overview, but I do want to kick off by saying one aspect of ethical storytelling that I think often doesn't get considered enough is from the reader's perspective. So Maria Bryan, she's done a particularly good job at getting this aspect more widespread and kind of better understood. So we asked her, what is the best way to share stories while being sensitive towards triggering others? And when we asked her that, she said, content warnings allow us to share lived experiences while supporting the individual agency and well-being of our audience. So kind of what she means by that is, when you clearly label some distressing material, you're really giving the story consumer the ability to choose if they want to continue reading that story or listening or watching that story. So here's some places where that might come into play. We kind of have this set of recommendations from a Memory Fox, but of course your mission might be a little different. But we recommend, if you know your story is going to contain sexual assault, domestic abuse or child abuse, animal cruelty or animal death, self-harm or suicide, eating disorders, or violence. So those are kind of the content warnings we recommend, but of course we recognize other missions might have other things that you want to consider. But I think just as in general, when you're thinking about a content warning, especially with the internet, you just never know who might be triggered by a story as they are just kind of going about their day-to-day scrolling, right? And you really don't want to have your brand be responsible for triggering potential donors. You don't want to make them feel uncomfortable and in a position where they might not have a positive association with your brand. So there's kind of this classic saying, people won't remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. So this is something that we like to think about when you're thinking about where your story might reach others and how that might affect them. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about trauma-informed language. So we asked our contributors, how do you balance being emotionally appealing to an audience without capitalizing on trauma? So this is a very common question that probably some of you in the audience are wondering today. We actually found there were kind of 4 things that came up again and again. So number 1, consider the golden rule. So we probably all remember, Gung talked about back to school today, like his kindergarten, children going back to school. We probably all remember that we learned the golden rule in kindergarten or 1st grade, right? And that's treat others the way we want to be treated. So this is also a good rule when it comes to storytelling. So before you share a story, take a moment to think about if it was you as the main character or a loved one in your life, would you want your story told that way? And if you think that there are some parts where that might make you uncomfortable as the storyteller, you might want to go back and make some changes. Number 2, it's important to remember, when we're thinking about emotionally appealing stories, that there are other emotions that are not negative, right? I think sometimes when we think about emotion, especially when it comes to storytelling, we think about sadness or despair or maybe even anger. But it's important to remember that there's a whole spectrum of emotions that do inspire audiences to give. So when I think about impactful storytelling, my favorite emotions to elicit are hope and relief. I think that when you are writing a story in a way that gives the donor hope for the future or relief that you've found a solution, a long-term solution to a problem, that's really what's going to inspire donors to give again and again to your mission. Another topic that came up pretty often was this idea that big trauma is not a necessity for all stories. So sort of similar to the last bullet, but specifically, I think we tend to think that an emotionally appealing story has to be something very serious or very big, right? But that's not always true. And I think that our stories don't necessarily have to be as traumatic or as awful as we think. And we actually can tell stories on a much smaller scale and do that more often, especially if we're investing into some creativity and thinking a little bit outside of the box when it comes to storytelling, and really just kind of trusting that you're the power behind a small story as well. Oh, oh, sorry. And the fourth one here, I know I was like, there needs to be another one here. The fourth one here is the idea that words matter, even if even if you don't know the quote unquote right ones. So, kind of what I mean by that is just be upfront and vulnerable with your storytellers. If you're not quite sure if you're using the right quote unquote language, just let them know. It could be maybe a situation, maybe their background is different from yours, maybe their race, their gender, their physical status. As long as you're just approaching them with humility and honesty, it really is okay to say, I'm not quite sure if this is how I should be speaking about your community or about you and your story, and we can learn together. Okay, so then I talked a little bit about Maria Bryan on the last section, but she also has this really great kind of trauma-informed pre-interview checklist. So these are some considerations that you might want to take if you are about to do an interview with somebody. This is obviously a very exhaustive list, but I just want to point out a few today. First, I would say right off the bat, please explain the interview process in advance and let them know the whole process, what it's going to look like, and how that way you can really get enthusiastic, informed consent. They're going to understand the whole process. That's really important. Another one that I want to point out, it is the fifth bullet down here. We have referral information on hand. So I think that if you do think that there's a risk that somebody might be potentially triggered or re-traumatized by telling their story, it's always a good rule of thumb to have maybe resources available like affordable counseling or support groups in your community, crisis hotlines, really something like that, just having it on hand in case they do want it, maybe after the interview or of course during the interview. And finally, I'll just point out the last bullet here. Reassure your storyteller that it's really okay to take breaks, give them space, let them know that this is their time to share their story and you don't have anywhere you would rather be. There's no better place to be than listening intently to their story. So offer breaks, give them space. All right, let's now talk about story collection. So we talked about the pre-interview process, and now let's talk about actually collecting that story. And before I actually share some of the keys to collecting a great ethical story, I actually want to show an example. So please, somebody let me know if you can't hear this, but I believe I shared my sound correctly. So here is a great example from our friends at Kids Health Connections. They actually collected this story and then used it to as part of a grant application.
I love the mentors and I love that they help me and they motivate me and push me up when I'm feeling down and I stop or I'm say I can't do it. They always say I can't, but I always say I can't, but they always say I can do it. Never say you can't. So I love that they motivate me all the time. And we're strong, fit kids.
I mean, that video is incredible, right? I mean, it's bursting with positive emotion. It's letting you know this is what our mission is. These are the people we serve. This is how exciting it is to be a part of our mission. I just love this video. And now I just want to chat a little bit about how this is actually an ethically collected video as well. So I kind of threw our logo here at the bottom on this slide because these are all things that we actually directly do here at Memory Fox. But number one, this story is a great example of an ethically collected story because we gave the community the microphone, right? Kids Health Connections, that is a video they took, selfie style on the spot. Because the thing is, with today's technology, you really don't have to speak for others anymore. We can give our community the opportunity to speak for themselves. And when you do that, you're empowering them to tell their own story exactly how they would like it to be told. Next, you want to encourage sharing where and when they are comfortable. So when you allow for this space, you're actually going to reduce the stress that it's going to have on your storyteller. It's also going to build trust with your storyteller and your organization. So this was a great example. You could see that video was taken outside. It was taken during the program. That was just something that they had, in real time, they decided to do it. Next, you also want to be upfront with how you intend to use their story. So I shared with you that they had told that family they were going to try to use that story for a grant application. That's what they ended up doing. That's just one example of a storyteller might be willing to share certain details or certain things about their story if they have a full understanding of where you're planning to use it. So, like this example, if you maybe tell someone we're trying to collect stories for a grant report that we're writing or for a grant application that we're writing, there might be certain parts of their story that they might be willing to share because they know only certain people will be seeing it, right? As opposed to something that you're going to put out on social media. So it's just something to consider, to always be upfront with how you intend to use the story. Next, you want to consider using strength-based or prompts that have strength-based messaging. So when you're thinking about what questions you're asking your community, and if they're going to elicit the responses you're looking for, it's really important to use strength-based prompts because then you're going to get strength-based answers. We're going to talk a little bit more about strength-based messaging later. And finally, this is a really good example of a story that was captured in real time. And I always recommend to anyone I share this presentation with is consider thinking about stories all year long as well. So you've probably all been in a situation before where you feel like it can be kind of hard to recall exactly how you're feeling or to elicit that emotion in a video or a photo unless you're still in the moment. So capturing those stories in real time kind of avoids those gaps. All right, now I'm going to chat about visual and video storytelling. So now at this point, you might be wondering, okay, but what do I do if the people we serve have to remain anonymous? And I definitely want to recognize that it's not always safe or comfortable for everyone to be on camera. And but I also want to recognize that I don't think that means that you just can't use video. So I'm going to give you some strategies. You could always record a voiceover testimonial. So if somebody is willing to write down their story for you and gives you consent to record it using your own voice, that is still a great way that you can make that testimonial into a video. Additionally, you can use visuals that relate to your mission. So something like packing a suitcase or maybe a painting that's in progress or somebody tying a knot. Those can symbolize transitions, hope for the future. There's a lot of different visuals that you can use that can be metaphors for your mission. And then even more specifically, I love this suggestion of telling the story of an object. So I know with Civic Champs that you probably work with a lot of people, or you work with a lot of volunteers that are doing stuff in real time. So for example, a Habitat for Humanity, if you don't necessarily have a volunteer that wants to tell their story, you could tell the story of the hammer and the impact that the hammer has had at that work site and overall for the lifetime of that family that's going to move into that house. Similarly, a brown paper bag, maybe for an after school program. Think about the nutrition that the brown paper bag holds and what that means for learning and for growing. And then there's also this great example of a delivery food truck. And this was submitted by T. Clay Buck. He said, Agents for Good in Canada did this brilliantly when they told the story of people experiencing food insecurity through the point of view of the delivery truck. So what they did is they simply set a phone on the console of their delivery truck. They filmed the journey of the truck all day while it was making its deliveries. There was no people in this video. It was just a visual representation of the impact they were having in real time. I mean, I'm like excited just thinking about that video. And I think if when you have a little bit of creativity, there's a lot of anonymous ways that you can still share your story. Another video recommendation I have for you is to consider a composite video. So you might know this as maybe a highlight reel, but it's kind of something that we're seeing more and more. But the idea of a great composite video would be that you have several short clips of your mission that you cut down really short, 3 to 7 seconds, you know, just the most exciting parts, and you put them back to back to back, and then maybe you layer some music or a voiceover over top. I'm just going to show you a short clip from the composite video I made for our holiday video this past year. What I did was I typed into ChatGPT, can you rewrite A Christmas Carol with my mission of Memory Fox? And I wrote a few things about what we do. So this is just a short clip from that video.
Success stories from far and from near. Now planting, now feeding, now shelter and aid. On veterans, on families, oh, the joy to be made. To the top of the story page, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash.
So that's just a fun little clip of a longer video that I put together to celebrate our audience for the holidays. But there's a bunch of clips from all of our customers as part of that video. Also, I always want to recommend that just because you can't have, maybe you're not able to have somebody from that participated in a program, or a volunteer might not be willing to share their story, I want you to know you are a great storyteller too. So selfie videos, these are ones where people are, you know, speaking directly to a camera. These are extremely cost effective because all you need is a smartphone. And there are, here are kind of my top 10 selfie video tips. If you want to follow me on TikTok, I'm doing videos like this all the time. But some ones that I highly recommend is that one on number 6. I would say that when you make sure that you have really crisp, clear audio when you're speaking in a selfie video style, because people are actually pretty forgiving when it comes to maybe it being a little blurry or maybe your background being a little messy. But if your audio isn't crisp, they are very likely to scroll away pretty much immediately. So that's kind of my top tip of these top 10 tips. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about consent and privacy. Like I said, this came up again and again throughout the report. And there was kind of 3 recurring themes. So my first one is consult legal counsel and your state laws. So I know people might be a little frustrated by that answer because it kind of sounds like, you know, a little bit of a cop-out, but it's honestly the truth because laws are different in every state. And if you have the opportunity to consult an expert or maybe even consider adding a legal expert to your board, that's really the way you're going to be absolutely positive that you've included all of the correct language that you need. Second, you want to get written or electronic consent. So we're no longer going to say that verbal or implied consent is enough. It's actually unacceptable. And just as an example, in a case where if you have a big gathering, maybe you have a 5K, maybe you're doing a Habitat for Humanity event, for example, you might want to consider gathering group consent up front, maybe when they're registering for that event, or definitely maybe when they show up that day. That way, when you are taking those group photos, there's no hesitancy there for what you might be able to post or not post. And finally, this is kind of a little bit of a new concept for me this year, but it's this idea that that consent is not in perpetuity. So on our website, we actually recently added a form where people can remove consent even after they submitted a story. So, you know, that's kind of something that we're trying to do to sort of mitigate this idea that people should be able to always remove their consent, even if they've already given you their story. So that's just kind of one example. You could do a form, something like that. But I also really love this idea of checking back in regularly with your storytellers. So, you know, have it be a part of your policy where maybe after every year you check back in with a storyteller if you're planning to post that story on a new channel or use it in a new way. That is something that is very, very important. And also, it might be you might get an extra positive reaction where they might actually have an update where they can make your story even more. They might have something else to add that you can share with your audience as well. So it's really great to just continue to check back in with your storytellers. Okay, so now this might be one of the biggest hurdles that we see because the customers that we work with are really excited about storytelling, but then they kind of think, well, how do I get everybody at my organization on board with storytelling, with ethical storytelling, with story collection? We asked our contributors. The question we posed was, how do we convey the importance of collecting stories to our program staff specifically? So how do you get your program staff to bring those storytellers to you or to introduce you to them? One strategy is, and these are kind of points that you could make to your program staff. So the first one would be that stories lead to more funding, which, you know, leads to more resources for your programs, right? So for example, our friends over at Classy, they did a study where they found that fundraising campaigns that include a video actually receive 114% more funding than campaigns that don't. So it's just, you know, pretty simple concept, right? More stories is more money, which is more resources for your program team. Next, you want to build trust with your program staff, and prove that you're going to be a good steward of the stories that they're bringing to you, right? So they likely work directly with the people that you are impacting, and they have very tight connections with them, and they feel like they want to make sure they're not going to be exploited or re-traumatized. So, you know, just as we talked about upfront, talking about giving your storyteller all of the options, also let your program staff know how you plan to stay organized with their stories, how you plan to handle consent, how you're going to keep their stories secure and only post it in places that you have consent to use it. Next, similar to how I just said that I think you all should consider a selfie video every now and then, don't forget that your program staff also has great stories to tell. Like I said, these people have a better understanding of your mission probably than anybody, right? So it's when you're trying to convey the importance of collecting a story, also convey the importance of them sharing their story and hearing from them as well. Next, promoting the transparency and sharing your storytelling plan. So similarly to building trust, transparency is just as important. Letting your program staff know that you will be upfront with your storyteller about the process, about the anonymity, about your timeline. These are all super important to also let your program staff know. And finally, hopefully you can just all come together because you are one team and therefore you have one goal. So I would recommend try to make an organization-wide policy. You might be wondering, how am I even going to do that? But these are kind of the 8 ethical storytelling guide must-haves that we found. And again, I would love it if you want to take a screenshot of that, but in the interest of time, I just want to point out a few of these. So kind of the 1, 2, and 3 all sort of go together. The first one would be to talk about the deficit-based phrases that you're no longer going to use. List them out. Let people know we actually don't plan to talk about our community in this way anymore, but it's really important to then provide an alternative. So you don't want people to feel like they don't know what to say or they don't know how to speak about your community anymore. Give them the strength-based alternative. And then finally, one other one I'd love to point out here is at the bottom, get everyone's signature. You know, when people sign a document, that's them saying, hey, I read this, I'm in, I'm going to do this with you, we're going to do this together. It's really just a way for them to kind of say that they're committing. It's also a really great onboarding opportunity for your new volunteers, as well as maybe your new board members, interns, things like that. Really quickly, I've got one example of strength-based messaging here from our friends at Horizons National. They actually put this in their strength-based messaging guide. This is an exact screenshot from them. And it shows this example of here's what we used to say. Here's another example of how we have evolved to need-based communication, but now we're going to do strength-based communication. So while they might have in the past said Horizons programs transform the lives of low-income students, and now they're all the way over on the strength-based side. We're now the alternative for them of what they now use in their messaging is Horizons programs support students in setting their own goals and providing opportunities for them to build social, emotional, and academic skills to reach them. So you can see the actual evolution of their messaging here. And that's super important to let people know, hey, yeah, here's how we used to do it, but we're not going to do it this way anymore. One other big takeaway from their guide that I love to share with you is that they wrote, if a student, family member, or any other Horizons stakeholder has a particular preference about how they want to be referred, that is going to be the strength-based way. I think it's so important to remember that we do have to ask our own community how they would prefer to be spoken about. What are the terms that they like? And when they have told you that answer, listen, because that is going to be the strength-based messaging. Okay, wrapping up, I've got just my top 6 report takeaways. So number 1, I want to let you all know ethical storytelling is a journey. It is not a destination. We are all learning together. Please keep going. Please keep coming to things like this. Be a part of our report next year. You know, come listen to my update next year. There'll probably be a bunch of new concepts that I'll be ready to share. Number 2, there is immense power in elevating diverse stories. So thinking about your program participants, but also your volunteers, your donors, your staff members, your board members. When you have all of these diverse stories, that's going to be such a great, transparent way to represent your mission. Number 3 is that, hey, I know we are breaking some rules, right? We're doing some things differently than they've ever been done. And actually, we're rewriting them together right now just by learning and working together on this stuff. Finally, we also have transparency and kindness will always serve you. So those are some of those other things that we said earlier about being upfront about what you know, what you're willing to learn. Number 5, I said this again, but consent, consent, consent. And this is maybe my most favorite takeaway, but I think, you know, when you work at a nonprofit, you have a pretty good moral compass, right? So if something feels icky, that means it probably is. So it's probably time to maybe reevaluate how you're collecting stories, how you're sharing stories, maybe talk to a trusted consultant, maybe talk to your board, try to figure out what is it that is feeling wrong and make some adjustments. And with that, that's my takeaways of the ethical storytelling report. Doug, what do you think?
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Carly. There was a question that came through earlier around from Karen that says, you know, what if individuals are illiterate, particularly in developing contexts? And so how would you adjust some of these tips, or how would you, go about doing that?
Oh,
You know,
sure.
probably
So,
around consent and
yes, you know what? I am really glad you asked that question because we have been hearing that question more often from our own customers, but not necessarily. It could be that they're illiterate, could be that they are just another language is their primary language. And we actually now we kind of have been steering our customers to also record consent so people can hear it. And of course have it available in the language, the preferred language of the storyteller. So I don't know if that helps, but basically it's kind of this idea that people learn in different ways, right? So being able to offer them a way that they can best understand, especially consent, so they know what they're agreeing to, that's going to be the like the informed consent way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. If folks still have other questions that are percolating, you know, please put them in chat. And so with that, we're just going to I'll just kind of jump in here quickly.
Yeah.
And in terms of folks, if you're less familiar with Civic Champs, right, we're a volunteer management platform. And basically, we help support nonprofits across the full volunteer journey. So from recruitment to onboarding, scheduling, engagement, and retention. A couple of thoughts, though, from this presentation was, I love the idea about telling the story of an object. From some of our previous webinars, we've talked about how powerful it can be to create that emotional bond with a volunteer if you have them tell a story that's related perhaps to the work that they're doing, or if they're bringing in a donation. It's one thing to bring in, a can of soup, for the food drive. It's another to say, hey, bring in your favorite food item from your childhood memories, and go around and sharing that, right? And those are really powerful moments. And perhaps if you get consent, you can actually capture that and share that with everyone, and it just creates a bond, I think, as well. In addition to sort of the story being shared with others, right? And then in terms of Civic Champs itself, we try to make things really easy for people to check in, onboard, and all of that. This is our mobile app. You can see that it makes it really easy for people to sort of tap a button and check in. But one of the things I thought was really interesting from Carly's presentation is we also allow people to collect waivers and acknowledge or create these sort of digital acknowledgements. And we have expiration dates, and you can reprompt people for that, right? And so I thought that was kind of a nice tie-in that fit with us as well. And then finally, we collect feedback. So I think we're one of the only folks that collect feedback after each volunteer supports you for the day. But I think this is a great way to collect these stories, right? They're not quite video stories, but maybe I'll highlight opportunities in terms of who might be a good person to reach out to collect some of these stories, right? And then of course we have a dashboard. You can see all of those potential stories, or maybe these might be folks that you just reach out to, not necessarily collect stories. But yeah, I think in terms of questions, I see there's a couple other questions here as well. And so Carolina had one around would a call out for stories on social media be a good idea?
Sure, like a call to collect stories. I think that's a great idea, especially if you have certain prompts that you're looking for, or maybe an upcoming event. If you have maybe your gala coming up and you say, hey, who attended the gala last year? Who wants to submit a video saying how much fun they had, or how much they're looking forward to coming back? That could be a really cool story to have to promote your upcoming event. Or even if you with Giving Tuesday, right? I mean, I know I hate to say it, but Giving Tuesday is coming up pretty quickly. It's just around the corner. And you might want to call out people that are through social media and say, hey, if you've given to us before, would you mind sharing why you gave to us? And then you could use those maybe as part of your Giving Tuesday campaign. Those are just a few ideas, but I think that's a great idea. I'm glad you asked that question.
Carly, do you ever incentivize people for those videos as well? So to say, hey, we're collecting stories or videos. We have a raffle, or we're doing we're selecting the best one as well. Like, is there anything that you do that you feel like makes sense to there?
Yes, so that is kind of one of our recommendations sometimes to our customers, recognizing that not every nonprofit, of course, would necessarily be able to offer an incentive, but it is obviously a really great way to motivate people, right? So yeah, we do have that as an engagement strategy that we tell people. A raffle is great, or even just something simple that you might have around your office. If you have like extra t-shirts, or you have mugs, something like that. People love to just have a little like rush that they might win something, right? So I think that's always a really good nice little incentive to offer.
Okay, great. Again, yeah, if folks still have additional questions, please feel free to put those in chat. But then, just to make sure that we share all the information we have today, if you want to stay in touch with Carly or myself, this is our contact information. Again, we're going to share out slides along with the recording, so you'll have all of this in your inbox pretty soon. And then we're also going to put in chat right here a link to our feedback form. And so if you wouldn't mind providing your feedback in terms of how you'd liked our session today, we're always trying to find great guests. And so if you provide really awesome reviews for Carly, we'll invite her back next time. Yeah, so if folks don't mind taking, it's literally like 10 seconds. And so other ideas that you have for other sessions you want, we'd love to hear from you. And then last but not least, a little bit of a freebie. So there's a goodie bag here that you can scan. Carly, do you want to talk a little bit more about the freebie?
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning more about Memory Fox, maybe getting a Memory Fox membership, we would love to offer a 10% donation back to your organization once you talk with one of our storytelling experts, get your storytelling plan. That is something that we would absolutely love, because we know that nonprofits that are working with you all at Civic Champs, you guys are some of our favorite missions, and I just love volunteer stories in general. So yeah, we would love to offer that. But also in the goodie bag, if you scan that, there's a bunch of other resources in there, like some of my recent articles about ethical storytelling that I've written. Obviously, the report is in there. So if you haven't gotten your copy of the report, that would be great. Those 10 tips about selfie videos, all that stuff's right in that goodie bag.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hopefully folks will have a chance to take advantage of that. I see Ariana's putting that all in the chat as well. And then finally, we have another webinar next week. It'll actually be on Wednesday because we are co-hosting this with Little Green Light and TechSoup. And so Susan, I think, from TechSoup is on with us today. So thank you to TechSoup for hosting. But it'll be 12 to 1 next Wednesday Eastern time. And so, yeah, please come and join us. You can scan the QR code to register. I'm sure you'll receive some a notification in the email that we'll send along as well. But that'll be a great one. We're going to talk about how volunteers can be a new engine in terms of driving, individual donor pipeline, right? And so super excited for that and joining our friends at Little Green Light. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll give you all back about 5 minutes of time. Carly, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate